Okay, you lovely lot, let's do the second video today, and that is abilities of the new champions coming in. As we know, we're getting Ebony Maw, we're getting Cull Obsidian, and we're getting Ronin coming into the game in the coming week. So let's deep dive their abilities and find out which one is the best one, and one that maybe I will be shooting for and maybe a lot of players as well will be shooting for as well. Some very quick champion cards can be found in the link in the description, done by Otrux in conjunction with MCOC Journal. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to be running off the Google Doc. Massive shout outs to Otrux for doing this and the amazing work he does for the community. Thanks, and let's roll into this. From what I've read so far, it looks like Ronin with a lot of things with precision, evades, bleeds, and other things that are going to boost the way that he crit damages as well as the crit rate that he has. He is going to be a mesh between different champions like Gwenpool, meets a champion like Spider-Man, meets a champion like Ghost, meets a champion like so many others, just amalgamated into one. And I'm really excited to see what this character is able to produce from a bleeding aspect, and as well the creation of more precision as well as cruelty buffs mixed in with masteries to boot. On paper, the champion is gonna get some amazing amount of damage potential. Damage output could be absolutely humongous, so that is something that I am really looking forward to. Especially the champion gets Fury as well, so Fury, precision, cruelty, bleeding, great. Coupled with the fact that he has amazing bleeds, if he goes up against champions that are bleed immune, he then gets a cruelty buff, which is amazing, especially because a lot of these are passive. It does mean that champions that interact with certain buffs are going to find it difficult. So a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, man, that is going to be pretty cool to have this as a champion to damage output huge amounts. Also, Kabam are taking another stab at this changing of stance type effect. But similar to a champion like Diablo, which wasn't really the best champion utilized for kind of hitting certain light attacks to then gain a certain type of poison or potion even. The fact is, now it's a case that's a little bit more streamlined in that you're kind of changing it based on light attacks. So you do light attack 1, it changes you into one stance. You then dodge back and then you switch into said stance. All of these stances are very unique, and that is something that impresses me a great deal. Even to say that if you go into a certain stance, you're able to bleed through blocks. Yeah, I know, that's cool. I mean, yeah, we do have Yondu, which does kind of similar, but the fact is, having this is still an improvement on that mechanic and does show the extent with other abilities being defensive, attacking, very kind of debuff orientated effects. This is incredibly positive, so yeah, absolutely love this. The L1 disorientates, which is great that it really kind of takes down defensive abilities. Next up on the L2, and this is where I'm hoping that there's huge damage output in the fact that you do absorb your cruelty passive effects to then transfer all of that into bleed damage. So that is a positive, but also a negative at the same time, because those cruelty buffs may be able to help you do lots more damage output. But if your L2 is going to be very powerful and at the same time inflict a greater amount of bleed, then hey, I'm all for just getting rid of my L2 and my cruelty passives to damage output a huge amount with bleed damage. When it comes to the L2, this is the point where you have options. If you've built up to 7 cruelty passives, it means that they're all going to be absorbed and you're going to be able to do a good amount of damage with True Strike. But if you've got less than that, then it's still going to be stackable and decent towards your bleed and damage output. So hopefully L2 is going to be able to smash a good amount. Oh, but it gets better on the SP3. So did you want to get into all stances for about a couple of seconds? Yeah, I think we'd all love to do that, because you'll be able to damage output a huge amount, be quite defensive and just bleed everywhere. So it's going to be brilliant. And also at the same time, you're going to be able to get a huge amount of attack rating bonus. So there are positives with doing the L3 for once. That's a bit of a rarity. Usually a lot of L3s don't really go anywhere, and half the time we're all about just hitting in the L1s, L2s. But yeah, if there's decency off this L3, I'm very excited to see if that's a point to check out. But also the name of the game is, if you have more cruelty passives, it's going to be beneficial for you. Even though there's decent positive things that are going on for Ronin with the synergies and obviously increasing the amount of the debuff of bleed, there's also 2 notable decent synergies that I want to point out, and that is the one with Nightcrawler and Guillotine. The Nightcrawler one, increasing that critical damage rating, is pretty decent, and I'm excited to test that out as I'm a big fan of Nightcrawler within the game. Also Guillotine, now if you've seen my recent video, adding this to it and seeing if this is going to be a bit of a buff, I will definitely consider revisiting this at a later date. So it is good to see that you'll be able to gain another soul. It's only 30%, which isn't much, but let's face it, sometimes that can be a bit more beneficial and making it quicker to get to an extensive amount of souls, coupled with the Night Thrasher synergy. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. Also, there is another better synergy with Moon Knight, and whether or not that's going to be something to improve the character greatly is yet to be seen. Next up, let's talk about Ebony Maw. Now, I'm going to have to try and not mix up my words between deterioration and degeneration, because you need deterioration in order to do a lot more degeneration. Yeah, it's a bit kind of a mouthful, but the fact is, the more deterioration you have, the more degen you're able to do, and it's going to be unavoidable damage. Let's face it, there's not a champion at the moment that is degen immune, so if there's a good way to damage output a huge amount based on this debuff effect, then it means that it's going to be pretty decent to have this champion in your roster. Every time the champion does a special attack, or it's a case of nullifies a buff, then you get a deterioration effect on you, which then at a late date will be able to be transferred into a degen. So that's pretty cool. Really excited for the damage output for this. Ebony Maw looks to be a little bit inspired by stuff with Ghost, especially when it comes to the point that he is getting focused and there's persuasion being placed in the enemy, but the fact is it's all about missing, and this happens when the enemy falters. And the method maybe to take down this enemy is to either do, as it says here, heavy attack or SP3. Now, because it gets degen, would this be something that a Gladiator Hulk would be good for? It's very difficult to say at a very early stage at the moment, but it could be optimistic. Ebony Maw seems to get some sort of persistent charges. It's not made completely 100% clear what they are, whether or not these are things that he takes on from battle to battle, and whether or not they're applicable to this building up of focus is something I'm still yet to find out more information on. But it does look fairly positive to say that when it starts the battle, it's then a case that the enemy gets some sort of weakness on, which, as we've seen in the trailer, looks a little bit like this. So that gives you an idea. And that could be the extent of the deterioration passive, but it's very hard to tell at this point because there are other things that it could be. It could be that faltering effect we just talked about. So we'll have to wait and see what that is. But it looks fairly likely those are actually persuasions, and once they reach to 100, it can be very negative for the opponent, especially considering the rate of power goes up just incredibly down. So that is going to be exciting to see how that plays out, and could mean that this is another strong control champion, like power control champion. This is going to be quite impressive, and it could be that number was actually persuasion. So yeah, when the champion gets to 100 and also as it builds up, it could be a case that this could be a viable power control champion. That's really good to see another mystic that's strong power control. But now it's the point of bringing that all together. So there's persistent charges we named about, also the idea of putting degeneration, swapping out the deterioration and things like that, all comes together with the missions, similar to a lot of these in the Black Order, these other champions. Missions are the key, and once a mission is completed, it is going to put a degen on you, so do watch out for that. First mission is all about nullifying buffs. The second one is all about power control, and the third one is all about that falter type, missing type scenario that we're talking about. So all three missions are going to be incredibly beneficial to the champion when you get to use him from a playing perspective. It's very difficult to find out how this will play out when you're going up against Ebony Maw, because will the AI know to go and try and do these missions by means of whatever? Will it be a case that they will be able to do that quite easily, but will it be easier for you as a player to do it? So we'll wait and see when that game comes in, that game mode. It also looks like Ebony Maw screws over you if it comes to the guaranteed critical hits. The guaranteed critical hits are not going to hit you unless there is a class advantage. That sucks, doesn't it? But the fact is, I'm sure we'll find out ingenious ways of dealing with it. And also heavy attacks. Going up against Hyperion, maybe the thing of the past with using Ebony Maw. You're able to steal that power gain, so that is going to be pretty brilliant. And also a percentage of their current power, so that doubly screws Hyperion over, which in some ways is good. It's nice to see counters to things that may be a bit frustrating if you don't have a viable power control champion, but you're lucky enough to bag yourself an Ebony Maw. The L1 is pretty peculiar in that if you have buffs on, then you're going to get punished for having those buffs up. Even more if you've got the Black Tongue ability active. But if you've got no buffs, Ebony Maw is going to give you a buff. How very generous. So for a champion like, for example, Daredevil. Daredevil is buffless at the time, and then for whatever reason then is presented with a Fury buff for a little while. So that could be quite cool to then just get back into the enemy with a bit more damage output. Could be quite unique. Also with the L2, the scenario is pretty darn sweet for you. If you go up against an enemy that has a lot of buffs, I'm talking like, let's take Venom from Act 4, for example. Act 4, as you know, has got that boss with Venom. He has loads of buffs. So if you have this champion, you go up against that, you're putting in an L1, you're then transferring them all to weakness buffs, you're then doing an L2, you're going to put on a lot of degeneration onto the enemy. So expect a huge amount of damage output from that if an enemy has a buff. But it gets also sweet with the L3. So you've put on a degen on the enemy, then for whatever reason, you then do the L3 very quickly. Boom, you're able to hit off a huge amount more of degeneration effect for the entirety of the battle. But it gets sweeter than that. You're able to take all of your enemy's power. So that is still pretty cool. A huge amount of power control off that L3 is going to be absolutely sweet. Even more so if you're going up against a champion, as we said, Hyperion. Ebony Maw does some good things for the rest of the Black Order. When you start a fight with a Black Order member, so Corvus, your Proximas, Ebony Maw and Cull, it means that you'll be able to have a crit rating of 20% increase. So that is pretty sweet, especially for those like amazing go-to champions like Proxima and like Corvus. And not to mention he's incredibly cunning, because do bear in mind, we want to be able to put buffs on enemies that maybe wouldn't have buffs. So if you're going up against a champion that does not get buffs and you want to put a buff on in order to maximize the abilities that Ebony Maw possesses, you can do just that by charging a heavy attack. So having this champion in your roster, coupled with Mr. Cull Obsidian, is going to be really beneficial. So you may you want to actually get this one to then exploit that dynamic. And now on to Cull Obsidian, and this is all about buffs sort of expiring, but at the same time what was built up during that point is then beneficial for what you damage output for the length of time. It's a bit difficult to explain this, but it's kind of like King Groot meets Hulk and then added into a new dynamic in the extent of building up as well as attacking outwards. Let's try and explain this a bit more. So similar to what you see up here with this trailer, and I'll put a link in the description to it if you haven't seen it before. This is from the Chinese version. The fact is there's some sort of build up, some sort of buff and some sort of persistent charge, and this can be explained. And this is basically here from what I understand. So it is all positive effects to damage output a huge amount with this champion. But what is exciting is about when you get +5 and you're able to allow attacks to ignore evasion and auto block. Very handy going up against some very difficult characters. We're always very annoyed with evasion champions, and at the same time with this auto block malark, it does, you know, rile up a player base, and you know, from me, from time to time, it is fairly annoying. So it is good to see a champion that is going to bypass that in a very quick circumstance. At this moment in time, understanding what route's all about is difficult because there's maybe some insufficient information when it comes to how the route works. Do you only use it once per fight? So is it building up those persistent charges and then you're able to use that to damage output a huge amount more? Or is it beneficial against what we saw a moment ago with the charges? We're still very much on the fence with what we see, so as soon as I have more information on this, I'll let you know. But what I do know so far is this is going to be beneficial against those champions that auto block. Your Medusas, your Iron Man Infinity Wars. This is another champion that comes in that can be able to do a bit of damage against those that would get those beneficial effects. Also, it looks pretty positive to deal with a champion that has an extensive amount of armor like Heimdall. So that is going to be pretty cool as well with the heavy attack. Not to mention the fact he can actually parry projectile attacks. So that's, again, really incredible that is a thing. Also, the missions look pretty cool as well. So Avenger, knock him down, Hero, knock him down, or any kind of champion. And as well, the third mission, which looks a bit kind of weird, but I'm sure that it's going to be something that's incredibly fun and also does move into the line of what the Black Order do, and that is their missions. So yeah, continuing on, and very positive to see this. The special attacks look pretty standard. The SP3 looks quite interesting because you're refreshing all those Thanos buffs. So that's going to be positive for you for damage output. So that's going to be great. It also looks like there are plenty of bonus missions when it comes to synergies with other Black Order members. And not to forget that if you go up against a hero, you're going to be able to get a Fury buff. So that is great to see for Cull Obsidian. So there we have it. That has been my deep dive into the abilities of these champions. My personal thoughts is that I really want to get Ebony Maw as well as Ronin. And the particular reasons is I'm a bit partial to Ebony Maw based on the fact of that extensive amount of degen. As you know, I'm a big fan of Dormammu. I love the fact that that champion does degen, and I think for an effective, little bit effective power control champion from Ebony Maw, not to mention the fact the damage output with degen off the L2 looks to be pretty darn sharp. And also I like the way the champion plays out as another member of the Black Order. If I could then pick up a few more members, then I'm sure that would be very good for me and my roster. Ronin as well looks great for cruelty, loads of different kind of like buffs, cruelty, precision. We're also talking the evade abilities with that, not to mention the fact that the bleeds look quite substantial, and as well as a few other kind of bits with fury can be working with that champion really well. Cull Obsidian does look good. I'm not going to take it away. I'm sure that champion's going to be incredibly viable for different situations. I just feel that more strongly towards a stronger Mystic in-game and also another strong skill. Since Aegon got put in, I think that, and also Nick Fury to a degree, but that nerfing was a bit dodgy. Having Ronin as another strong skill champion is going to be a great asset to the community, and I think we're all going to be incredibly excited when these three characters enter in the next coming days. But what are your thoughts? Which champion are you looking out to see and also get, and why? In any case, I've been RichTheMan. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more Marvel Contest of Champions based content. I shall catch you in the next one. Bye bye for now.